What if I told you that the most famous engine in American history was actually a technological dead end that Ford Motor Company promoted through corporate intimidation, industrial espionage, and systematic suppression of superior designs that threatened their flathead empire? I'm talking about the legendary Ford Flathead V8, an engine so primitive, so fundamentally flawed in its basic design, that Henry Ford himself ordered the destruction of advanced overhead valve prototypes to prevent his own engineers from embarrassing the power plant that built his fortune. While Ford marketed the Flathead as revolutionary V8 technology for the common man, internal documents reveal it was actually an obsolete design that Ford maintained through corporate warfare against competitors who possessed superior engineering. The conspiracy to keep America driving inferior engines for 20 years will expose the darkest chapter in automotive history. Welcome to 1932, the year Henry Ford made the most cynical decision in automotive history by choosing corporate control over engineering excellence, condemning American drivers to 2 decades of primitive technology while superior designs gathered dust in competitor laboratories. The Great Depression had created desperate market conditions where manufacturers were willing to sacrifice everything for survival. But Ford's response revealed a level of corporate ruthlessness that would reshape the entire industry. The Flathead project emerged from Ford's Depression Response Initiative, a classified program designed to create the cheapest possible V8 engine that could be mass-produced using existing manufacturing infrastructure. Corporate executives knew they were building fundamentally inferior technology, but they also knew that market conditions would allow them to promote primitive engineering as revolutionary advancement to customers who couldn't afford better alternatives. This wasn't just about building an affordable engine. This was about Ford establishing technological dominance through market manipulation rather than engineering superiority. While General Motors and Chrysler were developing advanced overhead valve designs that represented the future of internal combustion, Ford was deliberately choosing obsolete flathead technology because it could be manufactured using Depression-era labor and facilities that made higher profits possible. The corporate strategy was brilliant in its deception. Ford positioned the Flathead as advanced V8 technology made affordable, when internal documents proved they had access to overhead valve designs that were superior in every measurable category. Marketing campaigns emphasized smooth V8 power, while engineers were documenting fundamental design limitations that made the Flathead inferior to inline engines costing half as much. The conspiracy to convince America that primitive technology was actually advanced engineering had officially begun, and Ford was about to spend 20 years suppressing better alternatives to protect their profitable mediocrity. The specifications Ford published for the Flathead V8 represent one of the most successful campaigns of technological misrepresentation in engineering history. And when you understand the fundamental design flaws Ford chose to ignore, you'll realize why they spent millions suppressing superior alternatives that threatened their primitive empire. Ford claimed the Flathead produced anywhere from 65 to 100 horsepower depending on displacement and year, with torque figures that sounded impressive for Depression-era applications. These numbers were carefully selected to hide the fact that Ford had chosen the worst possible valve arrangement for internal combustion efficiency, creating breathing restrictions that prevented the engine from achieving even half its theoretical potential. The Flathead featured side-mounted valves that forced exhaust gases to travel through tortuous passages within the cylinder head, creating heat buildup and flow restrictions that made efficient combustion impossible. While competitors were developing overhead valve designs that could breathe freely and operate at higher compression ratios, Ford was deliberately maintaining technology that belonged in the previous century. Internal Ford engineering reports, leaked by disgusted employees decades later, revealed that company engineers had developed overhead valve prototypes that produced 40% more power while achieving better fuel economy and reliability. These superior designs were systematically destroyed on direct orders from Henry Ford himself, who feared that admitting better technology existed would expose the Flathead as the technological fraud it really was. Most damning of all, Ford engineers had calculated that the Flathead's fundamental design limitations meant it could never achieve the efficiency or power potential of overhead valve designs. But corporate executives chose profitable mediocrity over engineering excellence. They were literally selling customers inferior technology while possessing the knowledge to build something better, all to protect manufacturing investments in obsolete production equipment. Here's where Ford Motor Company's corporate strategy reveals itself as the most sophisticated campaign of technological suppression in industrial history. They didn't just choose inferior engineering, they systematically destroyed superior alternatives and used corporate warfare to prevent competitors from exposing their technological fraud. The conspiracy operated through what Ford internally called Project Maintain, a classified program designed to suppress overhead valve development throughout the automotive industry. Ford used patent litigation, industrial espionage, and supplier pressure to prevent competitors from developing engines that would expose the Flathead's fundamental inadequacy. Corporate executives made calculated decisions to sacrifice customer satisfaction and environmental efficiency to protect their profitable but primitive manufacturing infrastructure. Ford's legal department launched systematic patent challenges against any company attempting to develop affordable overhead valve engines, creating legal barriers that prevented smaller manufacturers from competing with superior technology. Meanwhile, Ford's purchasing power was used to control critical suppliers, ensuring that advanced engine components remained expensive and difficult to obtain for competitors who wanted to challenge Flathead dominance. The parts restriction conspiracy extended to aftermarket manufacturers, who were quietly discouraged from developing Flathead performance components through supplier agreements and patent restrictions that effectively prevented serious hot rod development. Ford wanted to maintain the illusion that their primitive technology was adequate, while preventing anyone from discovering what overhead valve designs could accomplish. Most shocking of all, internal documents revealed that Ford executives were driving company cars equipped with experimental overhead valve engines that produced twice the power of production Flatheads while achieving superior fuel economy. They knew exactly what they were denying their customers, and they chose corporate profit protection over engineering honesty and customer service. When the Flathead occasionally found itself competing against overhead valve engines on racetracks, the results exposed everything Ford had been desperately trying to hide from the performance community. The racing legacy of the Flathead reads like a catalog of technological inadequacy and systematic performance suppression that Ford would prefer remained buried in motorsport archives. Early NASCAR events became proving grounds where the Flathead's fundamental limitations were impossible to hide from competitors using superior overhead valve designs. Ford-powered cars were consistently embarrassed by vehicles equipped with engines that could breathe freely and operate at higher compression ratios, proving that Ford's claims about V8 superiority were deliberate misrepresentations of technological reality. Drag racing provided even more devastating evidence of the Flathead's inadequacy. Hot rodders discovered that extensive modifications costing more than complete overhead valve engines were necessary to achieve performance that competitors delivered in stock configuration. The Flathead's side valve design created insurmountable breathing restrictions that prevented serious power increases regardless of how much money enthusiasts invested in modifications. The most damning evidence came from independent engine builders who began converting Flathead blocks to overhead valve configurations, discovering that the basic casting could support significantly more power when freed from Ford's primitive valve arrangement. These conversions proved that Ford's manufacturing infrastructure could have produced superior engines if corporate executives hadn't been committed to protecting their technological mediocrity. International racing circuits provided glimpses of what overhead valve technology could accomplish when unleashed from Ford's artificial market restrictions. European manufacturers using advanced valve designs were consistently embarrassing American Flathead-powered vehicles, proving that Ford's technological choices were motivated by corporate convenience rather than engineering excellence. Today, the Flathead conspiracy serves as a cautionary tale about how corporate priorities can suppress technological progress for decades, creating environmental and efficiency consequences that continue to influence automotive development. The irony is overwhelming when you consider that Ford possessed overhead valve technology that could have revolutionized automotive efficiency in 1932, but chose profitable primitivism over engineering advancement. Contemporary engine builders treat the Flathead as a historical curiosity rather than a serious power plant, with restoration specialists charging premium prices for work that transforms primitive technology into marginally acceptable performance. The collector market values Flathead engines for their historical significance rather than their engineering merit, creating artificial scarcity around technology that was obsolete when it was introduced. Modern automotive historians are beginning to recognize the Flathead era as one of the darkest periods in American automotive development, when corporate power was used to suppress superior technology and maintain profitable mediocrity at the expense of customer satisfaction and environmental responsibility. The 20-year delay in overhead valve adoption represented a massive waste of resources and environmental damage that could have been avoided if Ford had chosen engineering excellence over corporate control. The restoration community has developed specialized techniques for extracting adequate performance from Flathead designs, but these modifications cost more than complete modern engines while achieving performance levels that were available from competitors in 1932. The Flathead remains a testament to corporate America's ability to convince customers that inferior technology represents acceptable compromise. Perhaps most telling, no modern manufacturer would consider producing an engine based on Flathead design principles, proving that Ford's technological choices were never justified by engineering merit, but only by corporate convenience and market manipulation. So, there you have it. The truth about automotive history's most successful conspiracy of technological suppression. The Ford Flathead V8 wasn't a revolutionary achievement. It was a primitive design that Ford maintained through corporate warfare, patent manipulation, and systematic suppression of superior alternatives that threatened their profitable but obsolete manufacturing infrastructure. But Ford's conspiracy against overhead valve technology was just the beginning of Detroit's campaign to suppress engineering advancement. Hit that subscribe button right now, because next week I'm exposing how General Motors systematically destroyed their own advanced engine programs to protect Flathead Ford from competitive embarrassment and the corporate collusion that kept American drivers trapped with primitive technology for decades.